Welcome to our On Topic podcast. If you are a person who wants to hear and diversify your knowledge on various topics, then you're at the right place. In this bi weekly podcast, we bring you various highly accomplished individuals from various backgrounds to highly valuable pieces of advices and nuggets of wisdoms. So today, I'm Vishnu, and I will be hosting today's topic on feeding the future with alternative proteins with Mr. Darren Lau as our guest of honor. Before we dive into our topic with Mr. Darren Lau, please allow me to introduce our speaker first. Darren graduated with a food science degree at the University of South Australia. In 2021, he received the Sir Eric Neil Award, being recognized as the most outstanding Malaysian student in South Australia. Following 2 years of research experience in cancer biology, Darren was awarded a full PhD scholarship by the Australian government to pursue his passion in food sustainability and alternative proteins. Darren is highly committed to contributing his skills and knowledge in food proteomics and molecular cell biology to drive the alternative protein space in Australia. Darren's ultimate dream is to ensure a world that can be sustainably fed by 2050. All right, then, let's dive into our topic today with the first question. What is the issue behind our current eating trends? How do alternative proteins come into play?
Thanks, Vishnu. So before I go into like the eating trends or alternative proteins, I would like to first remind people that the world is estimated to reach a population of 10 billion people in 2050. Now, if you're already having like famine or hunger issues all around the world at this stage, how are we going to sustain 10 billion people by 2050? And as we all know, protein is one of the most fundamental nutrients in our body. And the main sources of proteins have been coming from animal products. Now, globally, we're eating 350 million tons of meat every year. And this number, it's not going to stop here. And so this traditional production of animal products like meat, eggs, and dairy is actually very detrimental to the environment. For example, the farming of livestock, especially cows, is one of the major contributors to greenhouse gases emissions, which we all know that it is playing a very big role in global warming and climate change. And livestock farming also needs like very big land areas, which means that trees have to be cut down to make up that space. And it is also using up a lot of water and other natural resources. And so a huge portion of crops that we are growing today are actually being used to feed these animals rather than for human consumption. So there is a little bit of imbalance over there. And now if we're going to feed 10 billion people in 2050, we can't just rely on animals for food. We can't just keep on expanding the production of meat while we know that we're destroying the environment. Well, of course, there are other reasons like ethical or welfare concerns for animals being confined into small spaces. And like one of the emerging issues nowadays is the antibiotic resistance in bacteria. Because of all this unregulated use of antibiotics in the farming systems. So with all these issues, food security, environmental degradation, or ethical or health concerns, people are being pushed to look for alternative sources of proteins, which do not come from animals. And so the idea is to minimize or avoid the roles of animals in our food systems and make sure that food production is always sustainable for the sake of our environment and also our future generations.
Thank you, Mr. Darren, for the wonderful answer. So now let's move on to question number 2. What are some of the examples of alternative proteins?
So the main sources of alternative proteins are plants, like barley or oats, which are cereals with high protein content, and fungus like mushrooms, and these are really the common ones. Interestingly, people have been looking at insects as alternative protein sources. Technically, they're still animals, but it requires much less resources from the environment to farm for insects. And so it is still considered way more sustainable than other livestock like cows and chickens. In fact, you actually get a higher protein content by consuming insects if you're comparing insects and animals at the same dry weight. And well, really the uprising sources or the more emerging sources of alternative proteins are cell cultured meat. So meat that is being grown in the lab. And that field, we call it cellular agriculture. And also proteins that are derived from single cells like microalgae. And these two are really like the exciting advances that we'll be seeing in the next few years in terms of producing alternative meat or proteins.
Thanks again, Mr. Darren. So now let us move on to question number 3. So is it difficult to find alternative protein foods in the market right now?
Well, I believe it's not hard to find plant-based proteins in the market. For example, like soy products, tofu or soy milk or tempeh. So these are some really traditional staple foods that are very common in, especially in the Asian culture. I believe supermarkets are selling more plant-based meats than before, because you can easily find like plant-based sausages, plant-based nuggets or like burger patties on the shelves. Uh, Meanwhile, insects are not quite common in Malaysia, but they are quite famous street foods in other Southeast Asian countries like Thailand. In terms of lab-grown meat, it's not quite available in our market yet, but it is actually in the Singapore market. So one interesting fact is that Singapore is the first country that approves the sale of lab-grown meat in the market. So I think it really depends on the sources. I believe it's not hard to find plant proteins, but we will definitely be seeing more and more different kinds of alternative protein sources over the next few years.
All right, thank you, Mr. Darren. So now moving on to question number 4. What are the challenges in regards to the production of alternative protein?
So there are definitely some challenges presented by production of alternative proteins. So I guess technical wise, it is not always easy, especially for plant-based meats, because you normally get like a rougher texture than normal meat. And also to make up for like the meaty taste, people used to add a lot of salt into uh, to cover the plant taste. But there have been, I guess, heaps of technological advances over the past few years. So the quality is definitely improving in terms of the flavor profile and also the nutritional profile. But I think one of the most significant challenges for the alternative protein industry is about the selling price and the production cost of the products. So plant-based meats or any other kinds of alternative proteins may come at a higher price when you're comparing to animal protein or animal meat, because of the relative production cost. So the industries have been working very hard to try to find a balance between the selling price, which you can't set it too high where it will scare people away, and also the production costs, which cannot be too low, where it comes to a point that it jeopardizes the quality of the food. So it's really about finding a sweet spot between the selling price that people are willing to pay for and also the production cost. Um, in the lab-grown meat or the cellular agriculture area, there has been heaps of challenges as well. So one of them is that lab-grown meat is basically like tissue culture or cell culture. And in tissue culture, normally you would use animal serum in the cell culture media, which is quite contradicting, to the idea of alternative proteins, right? Because you want to avoid animals as much as possible. So people have been trying to replace the serum with other substances that do not come from animals. Other challenges such as like scaling up the production of cell cultured meat, to get it from cells to actually become chunks of meats that you can actually feed people. And there have been some also like safety considerations and like trying to find a word that can actually define lab-grown meat much better. So yeah, there are heaps and heaps of challenges in this area, but I believe they are healthy challenges which would help to push the industries forward.
So, great explanation, Mr. Darren. So now let's move on to the next question. Why has the alternative protein industry gained popularity and pace over the recent years?
Um, well, as I mentioned, there has been a lot of like technological advances, so we're getting higher quality alternative meats, and so I guess with that, we're definitely attracting greater customers' interest. If you're looking at like back in the days, people choose not to eat meat mostly for like ethical reasons, but now I think people are starting to be more aware of climate change and like how the production of animal meat is negatively affecting the environment. So nowadays, people are actually reducing meat consumption for environmental reasons. There has been a bit of shifting of the purpose of not eating meat. Many people are also eating plant-based proteins for health benefits because when you eat plant-based foods, you are actually also taking in other nutrients like antioxidants or like phytochemicals from the plants, which you can't really find in animal meat. In terms of investment, uh, many countries have put in policies to make sure that their country has like sustainable source of food. And so, alternative proteins naturally become national priorities for quite a few countries. And with that, it will definitely drive more investments or like fundings into research and development. And there are also some like venture capitalists that provide help specifically for alternative protein startups to help them establish the technology and business. And so we're definitely going to see more and more development in this field. And I believe that we're going to gain an even more rapid pace over the next few years.
So, another question regarding the alternative protein industry. So,
Mhm.
Mr. Darren, is the alternative protein industry progressing in Malaysia as compared to the other countries?
Uh, uh, Good question. So, well, I think the traditional, alternative protein foods like soy products are not new to the Malaysian culture. If we're looking at, in terms of the newer or the future foods, I think there is effort, that is being put to drive this area. So I think Nestle's first factory to produce plant-based meals in Southeast Asia is actually located in Singapore. Sorry, Selangor. So yeah, Nestle have been trying to work on this area as well. There are some Malaysian industries that work on plant-based meats, like Future Foods, which are making plant-based pork. And I think last year there was a company called Nangka. As their name suggests, they're actually making plant-based pulled pork from Nangka or jackfruit. So it is a really interesting industry. Well, of course, there are some other countries that are leading, I guess, way more ahead in this field. For example, our neighbor Singapore has been investing a lot in alternative proteins. Being the first country that approves the sale of lab-grown meat in the market. And then some of their new industries do really well. For example, there is a company called Float Foods that is making plant-based eggs. And there's also another company called Shark Meats where they are making cell-cultured seafood. And even their universities, I think it was Nanyang Technological University, they're offering Asia's first course on alternative proteins, which I believe it's amazing, right? Because they're trying to inspire the future generations to come into this area. And so if we're looking at further away like US and Europe, they are very well ahead, especially in the plant proteins area because of the culture of veganism. And at where I am now, Australia, there has been a lot of investments recently in plant proteins and cellular agriculture. And even in China, the leaders have been advocating for new protein sources away from meat recently. So they're trying to drive into the biotechnology area to make new protein sources. At the end of the day, even though Malaysia, I guess it's not far ahead, but I believe there is some progress, and it is a healthy progress. And since I guess green and sustainable technology is one of Malaysia's national priorities, we can definitely project the alternative protein industry in Malaysia to grow even more robustly over the next few years.
Okay, thank you for your answer, Mr. Darren. It was really concise. So the next question is more of about your opinion. So while many people support the consumption of alternative proteins, there are still many who are against it. What do you think that could be the reason for such behavior?
Yeah, so from what I see, people have been facing some challenges in terms of trying to promote alternative proteins. So I guess in terms of consumers, it really depends on the openness of the people. So we have the younger generations who are more likely to try new stuff, but we also have people who may be skeptical about alternative protein consumption, right? Because imagine, because people have been spending their entire lifetime eating meat, sometimes it's really difficult to ask them to change. And so I think marketing is playing a very important role here to try to promote awareness. Another thing is the price. Price, it is more expensive for the alternative proteins, but especially in this kind of economy status, we're not really in a good economy. situation right now. But with the technological improvements, and if something becomes more commonly available to people, the price will definitely be moderated. And I guess, well, if we're looking from the industry's point of view, especially the dairy or the meat industry, it is really about the loss of profit. But but I have seen a lot of meat or dairy companies that are actually investing into alternative products. So like oat milk, soy milk, and like making plant-based meat. So they are really trying to like redirect their business pathways. So I think the willingness to change and trying to respect the new trends are very important factors. And I believe that with marketing and education would be very important to try to address such behavior.
All right. Thanks again, Mr. Darren. So now let's move on to question number 8. So this question is more of directed towards like the younger generation, who wish to venture into this field. So what sort of careers are out there in the alternative protein industry?
So I think one common misconception is that when we're talking about food, many people think it's a job for food scientists. But really, in the alternative protein space, people are really looking outside the box. For example, if we're saying cellular agriculture or the lab-grown meat industry, you need to have people who have skills in cell culture and stem cells development. So industries have been trying to look for medical scientists or like stem cell biologists to take these positions. And you need chemistry as well. So you need chemist or flavor chemist or like sensory scientist to develop the meat flavors, right, and texture for the alternative protein foods. And then if you look at the industry that develops alternative proteins from microbes like fungus or algae, they're going to need microbiologists. And fermentation is actually a very big thing for the alternative protein industry because especially what we call precision fermentation, because through precision fermentation, people have been able to develop the meat flavors for the fake meats or the alternative meats. And yet, so microbiologists and fermentation scientists will also be very highly sought after by these industries. I guess other roles include food engineers to develop technology. And on the sales side, as I mentioned, marketing is really important to encourage people and to increase awareness. And so, yeah, this field really opens up a lot of different opportunities that are not just limited to food scientists. Or, well, in other words, you can say that food scientists would also have to become more and more all-rounded because we're really entering a new era of future foods where different types of skills would be needed to drive this area.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Darren. Now let's have a look at question number 9. What are some of the efforts that you have participated in or provided to promote alternative proteins?
So actually, I'm considered very new to this area. So it's just starting to establish myself in this industry. And so, well, I'm really thankful for the organizers to invite me to this podcast because I've always been wanting to play a part, to try to inspire our future generations to come into this space. Especially as a Malaysian myself, I would like to see Malaysia, being a major player in this field. And so other efforts, I guess, for my PhD project, I'm working on developing like an imaging method where we can pinpoint the exact location of different nutrients in crops like cereal grains and peas. And then with that technology, we can then help the industry to improve fractionation or extraction techniques to extract the nutrients and then make like nutrient enriched foods. And basically, what we wanted to achieve is to make the full use out of the entire crops so that we can reduce the wastage of foods. Proteins are one of the major components that we are looking at. And so I've been trying to use my PhD project to try to promote alternative proteins, functional foods, and also like food sustainability. And something that I would love to do, and I've always been doing, is to try to connect with like-minded people, so with a similar interest in this field. And so if anyone has any questions or would like to discuss anything, please feel free to contact me or connect with me through LinkedIn. And I'm more than happy to direct you guys to the right platform to get more information in this area.
Thank you so much, Mr. Darren. So now we are reaching the final question of our podcast. So, given at the moment, there are so many things to worry about, such as the post pandemic, racial issues, and global financial instability. So, do you think alternative protein is a thing that humanity has to look into? Why?
Yes, that is a big question. Well, of course, there are different issues happening at the moment that are stealing the news headlines. But I think we should always look, and plan further for other issues that are getting worse. No doubt climate change is a big issue, but sometimes I feel like it has been such an ongoing issue to a point where people just start to feel numb about it. Like sometimes just kind of just ignoring it. But we know that environmental disasters could be so much more devastating. And if we don't start acting now, our future is going to suffer. And so I think alternative protein is really about investing into the future of food and also the environment. Well, alternative protein, I believe, will be the future of food, given the ever-expanding population on Earth and the ongoing food security issues. And so the demand has been increasing exponentially for the past few years, especially plant proteins. And with the emerging new technology like the lab-grown meat, we are going to see so much more development in this area. And I really hope to see more of our future generations with a passion towards the environment and also food to get into this space. And together we put in our effort to protect our future generations and also our Mother Earth. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much for that final answer. It was really nice. So, you're welcome. So, I guess it's a wrap for today, everyone. All the members of OT Podcast would like to sincerely thank Mr. Darren Lau for being the speaker and our guest of honor today. We would also like to thank all the audiences who are currently tuned into this episode. We hope that today's session with Mr. Darren Lau has proved to be really beneficial and insightful to everyone out there. If you would want to listen to experiences and stories like this of other key individuals in their respective paths, make sure to hit the subscribe button below and the bell icon to be notified each time we release a new episode. If you would like to be a part of the OT Podcast community, do follow us on our social media pages. All the links to our social media pages are listed in the description below. With that being said, see you all in the next episode. Until then, take care and stay safe.